Sails are a vital and often overlooked part of a boat in terms of their importance of giving good, efficient drive. As they age, they stretch and go baggy. The first sign might be creases that won't go away emanating from the clew, or maybe parallel to the leech on the main as it stretches out of sync with the battens. A good foresail should have the draft nicely forward and stretch flat with enough sheet tension. If it has a belly that won't go away, usually further aft, it's going to need replacing. A worn sail will lose your drive and increase your heel. Of course, the other giveaway to sails being near their end of life is when they start to fall apart. We blew the clew out of our staysail here in a blow-off Ibiza. It still had reasonable shape, but it wasn't long before the material started to fail close to the seams. Once you start having to sew in these sorts of situations, you're going to be getting the needle and thread out a lot, and the only option really is to replace. But these days there's a mind-blowing range of options when it comes to new sails, so what to get? There are some very sexy laminate sails on the market now, super strong and hold great shape. I like the look of Hydronet from Dimension Polyant, an exceptionally strong woven cloth. Then of course there's the cut to consider. Everyone likes the look of a radial sail. Now for a self-confessed geek like me, all this technical research isn't too much of a hardship, but there's only so many notes you can make before you start going around in circles. So I started talking to the expert designers at Precision Sails because they specialise in sails for cruisers and working with customers remotely from initial consultation through design and delivery. So this video is going to take you with us through this whole process. If you work with Precision, it will be online, a really good efficient process, but not so good for our filming. Luckily we did bump into them at the Annapolis boat show, so we could film some real people.
So the most obvious thing about Precision Sails is we don't meet you. We measure up our sails and
Correct.
Then we send the measurements to you and then you deliver our sails. How did you come up with that idea and does it work?
We came up with the idea right at the beginning of the process of starting the company. Daryl Hodgson started the company in his basement because he had not a very good buying experience when he needed new sails for his boat. He said there must be an easier way to do this. And so when he started looking into it and looked into the measuring process of getting that measurements to a designer, he found that it was 4 or 5 easy steps, that if you followed them, you could take accurate measurements and get that off to a designer, and then it turns over into the hands of a designer. So the actual being on the boat part and measuring it is quite simple. If you're provided the steps and a little bit of a how-to on how to do it, it's not that difficult to do.
And he's not wrong, it is easy. So a few measurements to be taken on the boat, and you also need to measure your existing sail, which for us at Anchor took a little bit of ingenuity. So we have the sail in tow, which is going to row us to shore, and I hope that bit there is big enough for us to open it out. I think it is. Luckily the beach was big enough and reasonably flat. We were double checking our results though. So we're on our second measure now, changed roles, so Judy's reading the measurement. I'll write it down and see if it checks. And you can see if you pull it tight, nice and tight, yeah, don't raise it up, that's it. And I've got 13 meters 50.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep, okay, and you can see the curve of the leech a long way off, but that doesn't matter. You just want the straight line.
Yeah, exactly.
So 8 meters 30. I got 8 meters 25. Okay, so it's a bit longer than I had.
Yeah. Do you want to double check?
Yeah.
Triple check.
All these measurements will fine-tune the sail so you end up with a perfect fit.
That's one of the bigger misconceptions I think in the sailing world, is that there is a sail design for a type of boat or a boat. We custom design every single sail for every boat and, more importantly, every sailor. So a boat in San Francisco Bay, a Catalina 30 in San Francisco Bay would have a different sail design than that same Catalina 30 in the Chesapeake Bay. It's different wind conditions, it's different sailing conditions, and probably different sailors. And so we try to build the sail and design the sail so that the sailor gets the most enjoyment out of it.
So let's start tackling those difficult questions. Firstly, which sailcloth? Now, there are only a handful of sailcloth manufacturers. Everyone uses the same sailcloth from these few suppliers throughout the world. North Sails do produce some of their own cloth, but all the other sail loths are sourcing from the same manufacturers. But the range is still huge. So Precision tried to make the choice for the sailor easier.
They all make different products. They're all under different names. They change the names sometimes depending on the year. There's different ounce weights, there's different applications, different materials being used. We've taken a larger database of those things, and because it can get quite confusing diving into it and hyper-picking one specific cloth and trying to analyze that one on its own, what we've done as a concept is grouped them together into these series. Now, if you want to go hyper-specific, totally fine. We'll hop on the phone, we'll pull in a sail designer, we'll dive into it. Yeah. We're happy to do it. But 99% of cruisers, like you said.
So you say the offshore series is what you need
exactly.
for what you're doing, and that's
And it all again starts with that get to know you.
Yeah.
We want to know what you're doing with the boat. If you tell us that you're planning in 5 years from now to do a Pacific crossing, but you're just going to kind of coastal sail on the west coast for the first 3 years to get used to the boat, learn some sailing, go from there. There's two ways we can go. We can go with something like a 300 or 400 series sail, which is going to take the abuse. It is going to stretch over time.
Yeah.
It's going to take the abuse. It's going to last. It's going to be a good training sail for you to get used to it and dial in your boat the way you want it, and then replace it because they don't cost very much.
Yeah.
But if you're a sailor who has a good background, you know what you're doing, you know your boat, you're happy to do this, and that 5 years might be closer to 2 depending on how things go with something like the 500 series.
Yeah.
Because it's built for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
So with Precision, you don't have to research every cloth. We went with Dacron and the 500 series, which has the most robust cloth. And we went for the offshore option, which beefs things up as much as possible.
And the other big thing, obviously, with materials, and I mean, I'd already known that I wanted a Dacron-based sail. I wasn't interested in a laminate sail, but I would imagine you get quite a few people that are actually cruisers like us, but think, oh, the sexy sail's a laminate sail, surely. Yeah. I mean, we want the laminate sail. What would you say to those guys?
If you would like a laminate and I can't convince you otherwise, okay, I'll sell it to you. I will sell it to you. But think about what you're going to do. As the same thing you had in the conversation with Ron previously, we can go with something like CDX. It's a beautiful cloth. It is gorgeous. It looks great. It handles great. It just holds its shape super well, but it's expensive. And especially for cruisers, because that's who we're trying to support, it might not be the best option. And one of the ways that you can go about doing that is look at something like, again, the 400 series or the 500 series or even a tri-radial series of cloths. You can replace those multiple times for the same price as something like the CDX. Yeah. And depending on what your plans are with the boat, if this is the forever boat, this is the one you're going to keep it, okay, go ahead, commit to something longer term that's more expensive. That's totally fine, especially if you're performance driven and you want this thing to hold its shape and keep its shape as long as possible. That's the way to go.
Yeah.
But if you're a cruiser, you go from A to B, you're looking for durability and you're not looking for the cost associated with it, go with something like the Dacron. There's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah. But the thing that was a surprise to me, you're talking about holding shape, because I thought, well, a crosscut sail versus a tri-radial sail, you would say, oh no, you'd need a tri-radial sail. But that in the consultation I had ended up not being the case for us. They said, well, that's probably not the best thing for you. How does that work? What are you thinking when you're thinking of whether you want a crosscut or a tri-radial sail?
Oh, totally. There's mainly two things that come down to talking about a crosscut versus a tri-radial sail. Durability and performance. Same as everything else we're talking about. Think of sails as wings. That's what essentially they are. We're trying to generate lift to move our boats forward, especially when we're pointing upwind, right? So a tri-radial sail, you can have way more shape designed into that than you can a crosscut. Now, with newer design technologies and the way that works with engineering and manufacturing techniques, we can put some really good shape into some crosscut sails. Beautiful shape. But tri-radial, you can really dial it in a lot more. One of the tricky things, and this is one of the reasons why, again, getting to know you and your boat and what you're doing is important, is if you're heading to somewhere where you don't have easy access to a repair loft or you don't have a sail rate sewing machine on board, there's a lot more stitching. So if that tri-radial is rubbing across your inner stay every time you tack, that's going to wear out. Something like a crosscut, well, you can do that on board. It's a lot less work for you to figure out, depending on where you're going. Right. So again, same kind of thing as the series concept. It really depends on what your plans are with the boat, where you're going, and what you're trying to do. Now, as far as that goes, tri-radial series cloths, we tend to group them kind of performance and, not performance, sorry, durability wise, the same as a 400 series. Because the materials that are actually used and the techniques that are used to weave the cloth together by these manufacturers, you can get a crosscut sail that's more durable than a tri-radial sail.
Because it's a different cloth, and that's what I didn't understand before. That you're using different cloths for the crosscut than the tri-radial, aren't you?
It totally is, and one of the main reasons for that is it's weaved on a different machine. Right. The shape, the load-bearing fibers that are in that sail are weaved in the opposite direction of a crosscut, so you can go more vertical and diagonal with the panels. It's beautiful, but when you can run long, durable strands of fibers through those sails on crosscut, they're strong, especially depending on what you're doing, right?
So back on Fair Isle, we were on the next stage of the process after submitting our measurements. Our consultation with designer Jeremy, Precision, it seems, take their mission to keep things simple very seriously by only having designers called Jeremy. The designers, Jeremy's, will pick up any measurement which doesn't seem to fit with what they might expect.
The track measurements, I'm not too concerned about because my sail sits very close to what your existing does. Did your existing sail, did the car sheet to the very back of the track, or did you sheet it further in? Do you know?
Very rarely the back of the track. No, it doesn't.
Ask questions about how you use the boat. Look at the boat measurements you've given them and any pictures you sent them.
In our outline, we shaped the luff, leech, and foot curves. So like you noted in your video that it wasn't just a straight line down the leech. We'll also have a 2% curve, so about 272 mil, that it bends in at its max point. And then same thing, the luff actually has a bit of a luff hollow as well, so that the sail's getting forced into that foil. It creates a really nice flat entrance.
And they'll explain the technical details to whatever level you wish and answer any questions you have.
So are we saying that HSX in a crosscut sail is going to be a better lasting sail than a warp drive tri-radial sail?
Yes. Yes. Talking to the manufacturers, yes. It's a tighter weave. It's a tighter weave, and it's the direction of the weave that and then also the resin that they put onto it.
What's the deal with thread here? I mean, our sails actually, it is the cloth that's fouled before the seams, but from my sailing experience of boats in the past, it's quite often the thread that goes first, and it just starts to fall apart. Has there been? I mean, everyone talks about sailcloth because it's the sort of the sexy thing to talk about. What about the thread? Has there been good inroads in that? Is there good and bad thread?
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, traditionally we use a polyester thread. All of our threads that we use are all UV inhibited, so it's a polyester thread that has a resin that goes over top of it that protects it from UV. Over time, and depending on where you're sailing, right? Up in the Pacific Northwest, I'm not going to have to worry too much about my threads failing from UV. But you guys in the Aegean or Hawaii or the Caribbean, obviously, there's a lot more that goes into that. So eventually, it breaks it down, and you can just kind of check them, just kind of start to pick at them, and eventually they'll start to break off on you. There is PTFE thread. The biggest name is obviously Tenera, which is a product of Gore-Tex. Now, the problem with Tenera is that it comes only in certain gauges. And so when you get into offshore sails that have 8 layers of block patching, double tapes, your UV patch, all of a sudden your sail gets to be this thick. And as it's going through, the thread will snap. And so they'll be sewing, snap, and then they'll have to go back and forth over it to make sure that it's good. And then they'll sew, snap. There is now a number of other PTFE threads. I believe one's called SolarTex out of Bainbridge, which is what we'll generally use as kind of a second option. For one, it's a little bit cheaper. Tenera is extremely expensive. So it's a bit cheaper, but it's also a plasticized thread. It comes in a larger gauge, so they don't run into that issue. But because it's polyteflon, it also is completely UV does not break it down.
Yeah.
So it'll last the extent of the sail.
For us, this whole process went really well, and we're exceptionally happy with our new Yankee. How brilliant is this? The new sail is here. Just putting it up, shake the wrinkles out of it, make sure it fits, which it does perfectly. Look at this, if I put it in, so we're completely close hauled. It's slightly bigger than the last one, and you can see beautifully shaped, so it just comes in really close to the spreaders there. Gonna get the maximum out of that. Really nicely made, triple stitched, got our logo on, which is nice. But yeah, absolutely beautiful, really quality stuff. This is the Elite range, which is the strongest one. Should last many years if we treat it right. So we would definitely stay with Precision for our sails. Next up, the staysail and the main.
Really nice chatting with you again. If you have any other questions.